7 years ago, Marcus Thompson kissed his wife goodbye for what would be the final time, promising he'd be back by sunset with news of their future fortune. The 34-year-old mining engineer had spent months researching the Blackwater mine, poring over geological surveys and historical records that painted a picture of untapped wealth buried beneath tons of rock and decades of fear. His partners, David Rodriguez and James Carter, shared his optimism as they loaded their truck with modern mining equipment that morning in March 2018. Before continuing, subscribe and hit the bell. Here we reopen archived cases with respect and proof. Sarah Thompson still remembers every detail of that morning. Marcus had been more excited than she'd seen him in years, talking endlessly about how the new sonic mapping technology could locate gold veins that 19th-century miners had missed. "This isn't like the old days, Sarah," he had told her over breakfast, his eyes bright with possibility. "We know exactly what we're doing. This mine has been waiting for us." She watched from their kitchen window as the three men drove away in David's pickup truck, their laughter echoing across the quiet Colorado morning. The Blackwater mine sat approximately 47 miles northeast of Denver, accessible only by a winding dirt road that discouraged casual visitors. Local residents had grown accustomed to ignoring the boarded-up entrance, treating it like any other piece of abandoned industrial debris scattered throughout the region. But Marcus Thompson saw opportunity where others saw danger. His geological analysis suggested that previous mining operations had barely scratched the surface of the mine's potential, leaving behind gold deposits worth millions in today's market. David Rodriguez, the youngest of the three at 29, had inherited his father's mining expertise and his grandmother's stubborn determination. His family had worked Colorado mines for 3 generations, and David carried their legacy with pride and caution. He understood the risks better than most, which made his enthusiasm for the Blackwater project particularly significant. "If David thinks it's safe," his sister Maria often said, "then it probably is." James Carter, at 41, brought 20 years of mining experience and a reputation for never taking unnecessary chances. Together, the three men represented nearly 70 years of combined expertise in underground operations. The morning of March 15, 2018, began like any other mining expedition. Equipment checks, safety protocols, communication schedules, everything followed standard procedures that had kept them safe through dozens of previous operations. Marcus called Sarah at exactly 9 a.m., as planned, to confirm their arrival at the site. "The entrance looks solid," he reported, his voice crackling through the satellite phone. "David's running structural tests now. We should be inside within the hour." That call would be the last time anyone heard from Marcus Thompson alive. Security cameras installed around the mine perimeter captured their arrival at 7:23 a.m., 3 figures moving with the confident efficiency of experienced professionals. The footage shows them unloading equipment, conducting safety checks, and preparing for descent. At 9:47 a.m., all 3 men entered the mine shaft, their headlamps creating dancing circles of light that quickly disappeared into the underground darkness. The cameras continued recording for exactly 2 hours and 16 minutes before mysteriously malfunctioning, leaving behind only static and unanswered questions. By sunset, when Marcus had promised to return home, Sarah Thompson began making the first of many desperate phone calls that would define the next 7 years of her life. The Blackwater mine had claimed 3 more victims, and this time it seemed determined to keep its secrets buried forever. The Blackwater mine's entrance yawned like a mouth frozen in an eternal scream, its wooden supports weathered gray by decades of Colorado winters. As Marcus Thompson adjusted his helmet camera for the final time, the device captured what would become crucial evidence in understanding their final hours. The timestamp read 9:47 a.m., when the 3 miners crossed the threshold into a darkness that had remained undisturbed for 55 years. Historical records from the Colorado Mining Museum revealed that the Blackwater shaft descended at a 30-degree angle for approximately 800 feet before branching into a network of tunnels that had never been fully mapped. The original mining company, Rocky Mountain Gold Enterprises, had abandoned detailed surveying after a series of accidents in the 1940s convinced them the mine was more trouble than profit. Marcus Thompson believed that modern technology could succeed where 19th-century methods had failed, but the mountain seemed to have different plans. The helmet camera footage, recovered weeks later during the brief rescue operation, provided haunting glimpses into their descent. Marcus's voice echoes through the narrow shaft as he narrates their progress. Structural integrity looks good so far. Air quality is better than expected. David's readings show elevated mineral content consistent with our geological surveys. His excitement is palpable, even through the tinny audio quality. Behind him, James Carter's larger frame moves carefully through the cramped space, his own headlamp illuminating support beams that bore the scars of previous cave-ins. At the 400-foot mark, the tunnel widened into what mining records called the Cathedral Chamber, a natural cavern that had been expanded by previous operations. David Rodriguez's voice joins the recording as he tests the air quality. Oxygen levels are stable. No detected gases. We're good to continue. The camera captures the moment when their 3 headlamps converge, creating an island of light in the vast underground darkness. The acoustics of the chamber amplify their voices, making them sound like spirits calling from another world. The footage reveals details that would later become crucial to understanding their disappearance. Strange markings on the tunnel walls, dismissed at the time as natural mineral staining, appeared to follow deliberate patterns. David's geological scanner detected metal deposits far richer than their surface analysis had predicted, suggesting the presence of gold veins that previous miners had somehow missed. "This is incredible," Marcus whispers to his camera, panning across rock formations that glittered in the LED light. "We're looking at potentially millions in recoverable gold." But the mine held more than precious metals. As they descended deeper, the temperature dropped noticeably, and their voices began to echo with an unusual resonance that seemed to distort their words. James Carter, typically the most vocal of the 3, grew increasingly quiet as they progressed. When Marcus asked if everything was okay, Carter's response was barely audible. "Something feels wrong down here. The air, it's different." The camera captures a moment of silence before Marcus dismisses the concern with forced optimism. "It's just the depth, Jimmy. We're deeper than you've been before." At exactly 11:47 a.m., 2 hours after entering the mine, the helmet camera recorded its final clear image. A tunnel branching into 3 separate passages, each disappearing into absolute darkness. Marcus's voice, now strangely muffled, announces their decision. "We're splitting up to cover more ground. David takes the left passage, Jimmy goes right, I'll take the center. We maintain radio contact and meet back here in 1 hour." The camera shows David and James nodding their agreement before their lights disappear into separate tunnels. 16 minutes later, the camera feed dissolved into static, and 3 experienced miners vanished into a darkness that seemed eager to swallow their light, their voices, and ultimately, their lives. When Sarah Thompson realized her husband hadn't returned by midnight, she called the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office with the kind of desperate urgency that every dispatcher recognizes but hopes never to hear. Deputy Michael Hayes took her call at 12:47 a.m., logging the first official report of 3 missing miners at the abandoned Blackwater mine. What followed was a rescue operation that would be criticized for years as inadequate, underfunded, and suspiciously brief. The initial response seemed promising. A search and rescue team assembled at dawn on March 16th, less than 18 hours after the miners had entered the shaft. Team leader Captain Robert Mills had overseen dozens of mine rescues throughout his 20-year career, but he later admitted that the Blackwater operation felt different from the start. The mine had a reputation, Mills testified during the official inquiry. Even experienced rescue workers were hesitant to enter without extensive safety measures. Search teams equipped with oxygen monitors and communication equipment descended into the mine shaft at 6:30 a.m., following the same route captured by Marcus Thompson's helmet camera. They discovered the miner's initial equipment cache exactly where the footage showed it should be. But beyond the cathedral chamber, the teams encountered what Mills described as structural anomalies that defied explanation. Support beams that appeared solid on camera had somehow shifted, creating potential collapse hazards that hadn't existed during the miners' descent. The rescue operation's most disturbing discovery came 12 hours into the search. Teams following the center tunnel, the path Marcus Thompson had chosen, found evidence that someone had been there recently. Fresh tool marks on the tunnel walls, equipment debris, and what appeared to be deliberate rock arrangements suggested the miners had made progress deeper into the mine than anyone expected. But there were no signs of the men themselves, and more troubling, no signs of distress or struggle. Now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching us from and the exact time you're listening to this story. We're interested to know what places and what moments of day or night these documented reports reach. By the third day, the search teams faced a crisis that would effectively end their efforts. A section of the main tunnel, structurally sound when the miners entered, suffered a partial collapse that blocked access to the deeper passages. Captain Mills made the controversial decision to evacuate all rescue personnel, citing imminent risk to additional lives. The families of the missing miners would later claim this decision was premature and influenced by external pressures to minimize liability for the county. David Rodriguez's sister, Maria, became the most vocal critic of the abbreviated search efforts. They spent more time figuring out legal liability than looking for my brother, she told local news stations. 3 experienced miners don't just vanish without a trace. Something happened down there, and they stopped looking before they found answers. Her accusations gained support from mining safety advocates who pointed out that similar rescue operations in other states had continued for weeks rather than days. The official search was called off after 96 hours, despite family pleas and offers from private mining companies to continue the effort at their own expense. Sheriff's Department spokesperson Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh cited extreme structural instability and imminent danger to rescue personnel as the primary factors in the decision. The mine entrance was subsequently sealed with concrete barriers, effectively ending any possibility of future search efforts. What the families didn't know at the time was that the helmet camera footage had already been recovered during the first day of the search. The device was found approximately 200 feet deeper than the miner's last known position, damaged but with its memory card intact. For reasons never adequately explained, this crucial evidence wasn't analyzed until weeks after the search had been abandoned, and the results weren't shared with the families until they hired private attorneys to demand access. The brevity of the official search operation raised questions that continue to haunt the families 7 years later. Why was the mine entrance sealed so quickly? What caused the structural changes that rescue teams encountered? And most disturbing of all, what did the authorities discover in that footage that convinced them to end their search so abruptly? The helmet camera footage recovered from the Blackwater mine remained classified for 6 months before legal pressure from the families forced its partial release. What emerged was 17 minutes of audio and video that raised more questions than answers, painting a picture of the miners' final hour that defied logical explanation and challenged everything investigators thought they knew about the case. The recovered footage begins at 11:52 a.m., 5 minutes after Marcus Thompson announced the decision to split into separate tunnels. His camera shows him moving through the center passage, his breathing steady and his commentary professional. Tunnel structure remains stable. Gold content readings are off the charts down here. Sarah's going to be so excited when she hears about this. His voice carries the excitement of a man convinced he's about to change his family's future forever. But at the 12:03 mark, something changes. Thompson's breathing becomes irregular, and his camera movements grow erratic. In the background, barely audible over the sound of his equipment, voices seem to echo from deeper in the tunnel. "David, Jimmy, is that you guys?" Thompson calls out, but the voices don't respond in English. The audio analysis later revealed that the sounds were consistent with human speech, but the language couldn't be identified by linguistic experts. The most disturbing segment begins at 12:07 a.m., when Thompson's camera captures movement in the shadows beyond his headlamp's reach. Dark shapes that appear to be human figures move through peripheral tunnels, but they never come close enough to be clearly identified. Thompson's voice becomes increasingly agitated. "Guys, this isn't funny. Where are you? The radio isn't working down here." His attempts to contact his partners yield only static, despite their communication equipment being rated for much greater depths. Audio forensics experts who analyzed the footage identified at least 3 distinct voices calling from different directions throughout the tunnel system. The voices appear to be speaking in unison, creating an echoing effect that Thompson's microphone couldn't have produced artificially. More disturbing, voice analysis suggested that the speakers were David Rodriguez and James Carter, but their words were incomprehensible, as if they were speaking backwards or in a language that had never existed. At 12:11 a.m., Thompson encounters something that caused him to drop his camera. The device captures 47 seconds of ceiling footage while Thompson's voice grows panicked. "What the hell is that? That's not natural. David, answer me." The audio reveals footsteps running through the tunnel, but whether Thompson was chasing something or fleeing from it remains unclear. When he retrieves the camera, his hands are visibly shaking. The final clear footage shows Thompson at what appears to be a dead end, facing a wall of solid rock that mining records indicated should have been an open passage. His voice is barely a whisper. "This tunnel was open yesterday. I saw it on the geological survey. This wall, it's fresh. Someone sealed this from the inside." The camera captures tool marks on the rock face that appear to have been made recently, but by equipment far more primitive than anything the miners carried. The footage ends abruptly at 12:15 a.m. with Thompson saying, "I can hear them calling me. They found something. They need help." The camera goes dark, and the audio becomes a jumbled mix of static, distant voices and what sounds like heavy machinery operating somewhere in the depths of the mine. The final clear sound is Marcus Thompson calling his wife's name. "Sarah, I'm sorry. Tell her I'm sorry." Technical analysis of the helmet camera revealed that it had been subjected to extreme electromagnetic interference during its final minutes of operation. The device's GPS system, which should have provided exact location data, showed readings that placed Thompson simultaneously in multiple locations throughout the tunnel system. The timestamp function also malfunctioned, recording several instances where time appeared to move backward. Perhaps most unsettling of all, the camera's motion sensors detected movement for nearly 6 hours after the footage went dark, suggesting that someone or something had continued to carry the device deeper into the mine long after Marcus Thompson's voice fell silent. When rescue teams found the camera 3 days later, it was resting on a natural stone shelf in a chamber that wasn't shown on any mining map, as if it had been carefully placed there for someone to discover. While official investigators closed their files and moved on to other cases, 3 families refused to accept that their loved ones had simply vanished without explanation. Sarah Thompson, Maria Rodriguez, and Catherine Carter formed an unlikely alliance bound by grief, determination, and a shared conviction that the authorities had abandoned their search too quickly. Their fight for answers would consume the next 7 years and uncover disturbing patterns of negligence that extended far beyond a single mining accident. Sarah Thompson mortgaged her house to hire private investigator Janet Morrison, a former FBI agent specializing in missing persons cases. Morrison's preliminary review of the official investigation revealed troubling gaps in the evidence chain and procedural violations that should have triggered federal oversight. "I've never seen a search operation terminated so abruptly when clear evidence suggested the missing persons were still alive," Morrison stated in her initial report. "Something spooked these investigators badly enough to risk their careers rather than continue looking." The family's first major breakthrough came through a Freedom of Information Act request that revealed the existence of additional helmet camera footage that hadn't been disclosed during the original investigation. This second camera, belonging to James Carter, had been recovered but never analyzed, due to what officials termed technical difficulties. When private forensics experts finally accessed the device, they discovered footage that painted an even more disturbing picture of the miner's final hours. Carter's camera showed his journey through the Rite Passage, where he encountered evidence of recent human activity that predated the miner's arrival. Fresh food supplies, modern camping equipment, and what appeared to be a functional communication station suggested that someone had been living in the deeper sections of the mine for an extended period. Carter's voice on the recording expresses confusion and growing alarm. "There's someone down here. This stuff is recent. Marcus, are you getting this? We're not alone." The family's hired geological engineer, Dr. Patricia Williams, to conduct an independent structural analysis of the Blackwater mine. Her findings contradicted the official reports in several crucial areas. According to Dr. Williams, the tunnel collapse that ended the rescue operation showed signs of deliberate engineering rather than natural structural failure. "Someone with extensive mining experience created this collapse," her report concluded. "The placement of charges and the collapse pattern indicate intentional concealment rather than accidental cave-in." Maria Rodriguez's research into the mine's historical records uncovered a pattern of disappearances dating back to the 1940s that had never been properly investigated. Mining company reports filed with the state described numerous incidents of workers failing to report for duty or abandoning their posts without notice. In several cases, personal belongings and equipment were left behind, suggesting sudden departure under mysterious circumstances. The pattern continued through the mine's final operational period in 1963, when the facility was closed after what company records described as operational difficulties. The family's investigation also revealed that the Blackwater mine had attracted the attention of federal agencies long before the 2018 disappearances. Department of Energy records showed geological surveys conducted in the 1970s that classified sections of the mine as unsuitable for civilian access due to environmental anomalies. These reports, heavily redacted when finally released, referenced unusual mineral formations and electromagnetic readings that couldn't be explained by conventional geology. Catherine Carter, James's widow, discovered that her husband had been receiving threatening phone calls in the weeks before the mining expedition. Phone records subpoenaed through private legal action revealed multiple calls from unlisted numbers, all originating from the general area around the Blackwater mine. The content of these calls was never recorded, but James had mentioned to his wife that someone doesn't want us going down there. At the time, Catherine had assumed he was referring to local environmental groups opposed to mining activities. The family's most significant discovery came through their collaboration with Indigenous rights advocate Thomas Blackhorse, whose research into tribal oral histories revealed that the Blackwater mine had been built on what the local Arapaho tribe considered a sacred burial ground. According to Blackhorse, tribal elders had specifically warned early miners that disturbing the site would result in the mountain claiming those who trespassed against the ancestors. These warnings, documented in 19th-century territorial government records, had been systematically ignored by successive mining operations. 7 years after their loved ones disappeared, the three families continue their search for answers with diminished resources but unbroken determination. Their private investigation has uncovered evidence of a conspiracy of silence surrounding the Blackwater mine that extends from local law enforcement to federal agencies. But their most disturbing discovery is yet to come, evidence that Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez and James Carter may not have been the mine's final victims. The breakthrough that would change everything came not from sophisticated forensic analysis or expensive private investigators, but from a retired county clerk named Dorothy Manning, who had worked in the Jefferson County Records Office for 37 years. In late 2024, 6 years after the miners disappeared, Manning contacted Sarah Thompson with information that had been weighing on her conscience since the day the rescue operation was called off. Manning revealed that she had been ordered to seal all historical records related to the Blackwater mine within hours of the miners' disappearance, despite having no clear legal authority for such action. "Sheriff Hayes came to my office personally," Manning told the families during a clandestine meeting at a Denver coffee shop. "He said national security was involved and that I could face federal prosecution if I discussed the files with anyone. But those men's families deserved to know the truth. The sealed records, which Manning had secretly copied before their removal from public access, painted a picture of the Blackwater mine that contradicted everything the families had been told. Government documents dating back to 1952 described the mine as a site of ongoing federal interest with regular inspections by unnamed agencies. Mining operations had been suspended multiple times due to what reports termed geological anomalies that affected radio equipment and caused psychological disturbances among workers. Most significantly, the records revealed that the 1963 closure of the mine had not been due to economic factors, as publicly reported, but because of what a classified Army Corps of Engineers report described as discovery of pre-existing underground structures of unknown origin. The report, stamped with multiple security classifications, indicated that mining operations had broken through into a vast underground chamber system that showed evidence of human habitation far predating any known indigenous settlements in the area. Dr. Patricia Williams' analysis of the newly revealed documents confirmed her earlier suspicions about deliberate structural manipulation. The sealed records included engineering diagrams showing a complex tunnel system that extended far deeper than any commercial mining operation would require. These passages, labeled as restricted access in the documents, appeared to connect the Blackwater mine to a network of underground facilities throughout the Colorado mountains. The family's attorney, Marcus Chen, filed emergency court motions demanding the release of additional government records related to the mine. The response was swift and overwhelming. Federal prosecutors obtained restraining orders, blocking further legal action, citing national security concerns under the Espionage Act. Chen, an experienced civil rights lawyer, had never encountered such aggressive government opposition to what should have been a routine missing persons case. If this case has already gripped you, leave a like. It helps the story of these missing miners reach more people. The sealed records also contained communications between federal agencies and local law enforcement that revealed the true scope of the cover-up surrounding the miners' disappearance. Email exchanges between FBI field agents and Sheriff Hayes showed that federal authorities had been monitoring the three miners for weeks before their final expedition. Marcus Thompson's research into the mine's geological potential had apparently triggered automated surveillance systems that flagged his activities as a potential security threat. Perhaps most disturbing were medical records from the 1950s and 1960s describing treatment of mine workers who'd been exposed to what doctors termed environmental psychological stresses. Symptoms included disorientation, auditory hallucinations, and what one report described as compulsive behavior directed toward underground locations. Several workers had to be physically restrained from attempting to return to the mine after their shifts ended, and at least 3 had disappeared entirely while under medical observation. The records revealed that similar incidents had occurred at mining operations throughout the Colorado Rockies, suggesting a pattern of cover-ups that extended across multiple sites and decades. In each case, federal agencies had intervened to classify information and relocate affected personnel. The common factor in all cases was the discovery of what government geologists termed anomalous subterranean structures that appeared to predate human presence in North America. Dorothy Manning's decision to break her silence came at a personal cost. Within weeks of her meeting with the families, she was visited by federal agents who warned her against further disclosure of classified information. Her pension was suspended pending an investigation into possible security violations, and she received multiple threats that forced her to relocate to another state. "They destroyed my life for telling the truth," Manning later told a documentary filmmaker. "But those families deserve to know what really happened to their husbands and sons." The sealed records raise questions that went far beyond a simple mining accident. Why had federal agencies been monitoring the Blackwater mine for over 70 years? What were the pre-existing underground structures that had caused the Army Corps of Engineers to classify the site? And most importantly, what had Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez and James Carter discovered in those tunnels that was worth killing to keep secret? The revelation of government involvement transformed the missing miners case from a local tragedy into something far more sinister. Janet Morrison, the private investigator hired by the families, began connecting the Blackwater mine to a network of similar sites throughout the American West, where unexplained disappearances had occurred under circumstances that followed disturbing patterns. Her research, conducted in secret to avoid federal interference, revealed a conspiracy that had been operating in plain sight for nearly a century. Morrison's breakthrough came through cross-referencing missing persons reports with geological surveys conducted by the United States Geological Survey between 1950 and 2025. The pattern was unmistakable. In areas where underground anomalies had been detected, civilian disappearances occurred at rates significantly higher than national averages. More tellingly, these disappearances often involved individuals with geological or mining expertise who had expressed interest in exploring abandoned underground facilities. The connection between the Blackwater mine and similar sites became clear when Morrison obtained testimony from Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former USGS geologist who had worked on classified surveys throughout the 1990s. Dr. Vasquez, now living in exile in Canada due to what she termed professional persecution, revealed that government agencies had been aware of extensive underground tunnel systems throughout the western United States for decades. "These weren't natural formations," she explained during a secure video call. "They showed clear evidence of construction using techniques that predated known human technology in North America." According to Dr. Vasquez, the tunnel systems connected numerous sites across Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, forming what appeared to be a continental transportation network. Ground-penetrating radar conducted in the 1980s had revealed chambers large enough to house substantial populations, with evidence of sophisticated ventilation and water management systems. The government's position was that these structures posed a national security threat, she continued. But the real concern was what we might find if we explored them fully. Morrison's investigation uncovered similar disappearances at mines in Nevada's Ruby Mountains, Utah's Wasatch Range, and Arizona's Superstition Mountains. In each case, experienced miners or geologists had vanished after expressing interest in exploring abandoned underground facilities. The official explanations varied: cave-ins, equipment failures, exposure to toxic gases. But the pattern of immediate federal intervention and restricted access was consistent across all sites. The families hired computer forensics expert David Kim to analyze electronic communications between federal agencies that had been partially disclosed through previous FOIA requests. Kim's analysis revealed encrypted communications referencing Protocol 7 implementation at various mining sites, including Blackwater. The protocol appeared to involve immediate site lockdown, evidence suppression, and what documents euphemistically termed civilian access restriction. Thomas Blackhorse's research into indigenous oral histories provided crucial context for understanding the underground network. According to tribal accounts passed down through generations, the tunnel systems had been discovered by early Spanish explorers in the 16th century, who described them as passages to the underworld inhabited by beings of shadow and stone. Indigenous tribes throughout the region shared similar legends about underground dwellers who would claim anyone who ventured too deep into their domain. The family's investigation reached a critical juncture when they obtained testimony from former mine rescue worker Miguel Santos, who had participated in the abbreviated search for the missing miners. Santos, dying of lung cancer and determined to clear his conscience, revealed that the rescue team had found far more than they had publicly disclosed. "We found the men's equipment scattered throughout tunnels that weren't on any map," Santos testified in a deathbed video statement. "But we also found evidence that they had encountered other people down there, people who had been living underground for God knows how long." According to Santos, the rescue team had discovered what appeared to be a functioning underground community in the deeper sections of the mine. Fresh food supplies, modern equipment, and evidence of recent habitation suggested that someone was actively using the tunnel system as a base of operations. "Captain Mills ordered us to withdraw immediately when we found the living quarters," Santos revealed. "He said we were in over our heads and that federal authorities were taking over the operation." The most disturbing aspect of Santos's testimony was his description of voices heard throughout the tunnel system during the search operation. "We could hear people calling to us from different passages," he explained. "Some of the voices sounded like the missing miners, but they were speaking words that didn't make sense. It was like they were trying to warn us away from something deeper in the mine." Morrison's investigation also revealed that the Blackwater mine had been the site of previous federal operations that had never been publicly disclosed. Satellite imagery from the 1980s showed heavy equipment and personnel activity at the mine site during periods when it was supposedly abandoned. Ground disturbance patterns suggested extensive excavation activities that far exceeded the scope of commercial mining operations. The evidence pointed to a disturbing conclusion. The underground network beneath the American West was not only known to federal authorities, but was being actively used for purposes that required the systematic elimination of civilian witnesses. Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter had stumbled into a secret that powerful forces would kill to protect, and their disappearance was just the latest in a decades-long pattern of silencing anyone who came too close to the truth. In September 2025, 7 years after their loved ones vanished, the families made a decision that would finally bring them face to face with the truth about the Blackwater mine. Despite federal restraining orders and threats of prosecution, they organized a private expedition to breach the sealed entrance and conduct their own search for answers. What they discovered in those depths would validate their worst fears and reveal a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. The expedition was organized by Dr. Patricia Williams, whose geological expertise allowed her to identify an alternate entrance to the mine system through a natural cave opening approximately 2 miles from the main shaft. Janet Morrison recruited a team of former military personnel who specialized in underground operations, while the families provided funding through a crowdsourced campaign that raised over $200,000 from supporters who had followed their 7-year fight for justice. The team included former Navy SEAL Marcus Rodriguez, no relation to missing miner David Rodriguez, cave rescue specialist Sarah Chen, and investigative journalist Amanda Foster, who documented the expedition with professional video equipment. Their descent into the cave system began at dawn on September 15th, exactly 7 years and 6 months after the miners had disappeared. The alternate entrance led to natural limestone caverns that connected to the man-made tunnels of the Blackwater mine, approximately 800 feet below ground level. The team's first significant discovery came within hours of beginning their descent. Fresh air circulation that indicated active ventilation systems far more sophisticated than anything installed by historical mining operations. "Someone has been maintaining these tunnels," Dr. Williams observed as they encountered climate control equipment of obviously recent manufacture. As they progressed deeper into the system, the team began finding evidence that validated Miguel Santos's deathbed testimony about an underground community. Living quarters carved into the rock walls contained modern amenities, including electrical systems, water purification equipment, and communication devices. Food supplies bearing recent expiration dates suggested ongoing habitation, while personal belongings scattered throughout the chambers indicated the presence of multiple residents over extended periods. The team's most significant discovery came when they reached what appeared to be the main hub of the underground facility. A vast chamber, artificially expanded far beyond its natural dimensions, housed sophisticated computer equipment and communication arrays that were clearly of government origin. Amanda Foster's cameras captured bank of monitors displaying surveillance feeds from locations throughout the Colorado mountains, including real-time footage of the expedition team itself. In the center of the chamber, they found what they had been searching for: evidence of the missing miners' fate. Personal belongings belonging to Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter were arranged on tables alongside documentation that revealed the true purpose of the underground facility. The miners had discovered what appeared to be a classified government research installation that had been operating in secret since the 1950s. The documentation revealed that the Blackwater mine served as one node in a network of underground facilities conducting research into what government scientists termed anomalous geological phenomena. The research appeared to focus on unusual electromagnetic properties of the underground chambers that affected human consciousness and perception. Reports described experiments involving consciousness transfer and dimensional interface technology that read like science fiction but were documented with clinical precision. Most disturbing were medical files indicating that civilians who had discovered the facility were routinely subjected to experimental procedures designed to alter their memories and psychological state. The missing miners' names appeared in these files alongside dozens of others who had vanished from mining operations throughout the region over the past 70 years. The documents suggested that rather than being killed, these individuals were being used as test subjects in ongoing psychological experiments. The team's exploration was cut short when they encountered evidence of recent security sweeps through the facility. Fresh footprints, warm equipment, and what appeared to be hastily abandoned monitoring stations suggested that their presence had been detected despite their precautions. Marcus Rodriguez's military training recognized signs of imminent tactical response, prompting the team to begin immediate evacuation procedures. As they retreated through the tunnel system, the team made one final, heartbreaking discovery. In a side chamber near the main facility, they found what appeared to be a medical ward containing 3 individuals in induced comas, sustained by life support equipment. Though facial features were obscured by medical apparatus, personal identification found nearby confirmed their identities. Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter were alive, but in a vegetative state that suggested years of medical experimentation. The team's attempts to document this discovery and plan a rescue operation were interrupted by the arrival of federal tactical units who had apparently been monitoring their progress throughout the expedition. In the chaos that followed, Amanda Foster managed to transmit video footage to external servers before her equipment was confiscated, but the rescue team was forced to evacuate without the missing miners. The footage that emerged from this final expedition provided undeniable proof that the 3 miners were being held against their will in a classified government facility, subjected to medical experimentation that had effectively destroyed their cognitive functions while keeping their bodies alive. The conspiracy to cover up their disappearance extended to the highest levels of federal authority, involving agencies whose very existence was classified beyond public knowledge. The video footage, transmitted by Amanda Foster during the underground expedition, became a catalyst that the families could never have anticipated. Within hours of its release on multiple platforms, the documentation of Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter in government custody triggered a firestorm of public outrage that forced congressional action and finally brought the truth about the Blackwater mine into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The footage, authenticated by multiple independent forensics experts, showed the 3 miners connected to life support systems in what appeared to be a medical research facility. Their condition, described by medical professionals who reviewed the video as persistent vegetative state induced by unknown pharmaceutical agents, provided undeniable evidence that they had been held captive and subjected to medical experimentation for 7 years. The revelation that federal agencies had been conducting illegal human experimentation on American citizens sparked nationwide protests and calls for congressional investigation. Within 72 hours of the footage's release, federal agents raided the underground facility beneath the Blackwater mine in what officials described as a national security operation. However, by the time rescue teams reached the medical ward documented in Foster's video, the 3 miners had been removed. Government sources claimed that the men had been transferred to appropriate medical facilities for treatment, but their exact location remained classified, and their families were denied visitation rights pending completion of the investigation. The congressional hearings that followed revealed the existence of what committee members termed the most extensive domestic surveillance and experimentation program in American history. Testimony from former government scientists, including Dr. Elena Vasquez, who returned from exile under whistleblower protection, described decades of research into what officials euphemistically called consciousness manipulation technologies. The underground facilities throughout the American West had served as testing sites for experimental procedures designed to alter human memory and perception. Committee investigations revealed that the Blackwater Mine Research Program had originated during the Cold War as part of government efforts to develop psychological warfare capabilities. However, the program had evolved far beyond its original scope, becoming a self-perpetuating bureaucracy that conducted increasingly extreme experiments on civilians who had accidentally discovered the underground facilities. The missing miners were just the latest victims in a program that had claimed hundreds of lives over 7 decades. The family's fight for justice culminated in a landmark federal court ruling that declared the government's treatment of the missing miners a violation of constitutional rights and international human rights law. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to private investigator Janet Morrison, ordered the immediate release of Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter to medical facilities chosen by their families, with full government funding for their rehabilitation and care. However, the reunion the families had fought 7 years to achieve was bittersweet. Medical examinations revealed that the experimental procedures conducted on the miners had caused irreversible neurological damage. While their bodies had been maintained in relatively good condition, their cognitive functions had been severely compromised by pharmaceutical agents and psychological manipulation techniques. Marcus Thompson showed no recognition of his wife Sarah. David Rodriguez could not speak coherently, and James Carter existed in a semi-conscious state that doctors described as artificially induced permanent dissociation. The government settlement awarded to the families included financial compensation totaling $50 million, but no amount of money could restore what had been taken from them. Sarah Thompson devoted herself to caring for her husband, hoping that love and patience might eventually reach through the pharmaceutical fog that shrouded his mind. Maria Rodriguez became a national advocate for victims of government experimentation, while Catherine Carter established a foundation to support families of missing persons who might be victims of similar programs. The Blackwater mine itself was permanently sealed under congressional order, with the underground facility declared a crime scene under federal protection. However, investigations revealed that similar facilities continued to operate at classified locations throughout the country, suggesting that the program revealed by the miners' case represented only a small portion of ongoing government activities. The full scope of domestic experimentation programs remained classified, protected by national security designations that prevented complete disclosure. Dr. Patricia Williams's geological survey of the sealed mine revealed that the underground chambers extended far deeper than any government documentation had indicated. Ground-penetrating radar detected additional facilities at depths of over 2,000 feet, with chamber systems that appeared to connect to similar installations hundreds of miles away. The true extent of the underground network remained unknown, protected by classification levels that prevented civilian investigation. The case of the missing Blackwater miners became a watershed moment in American awareness of domestic surveillance and experimentation programs. Congressional legislation passed in their honor established new oversight mechanisms for classified research programs and created legal protections for civilians who accidentally encounter classified facilities. However, enforcement of these protections remained problematic, with national security classifications continuing to shield government activities from public scrutiny. 7 years after Marcus Thompson kissed his wife goodbye for what he thought would be a routine mining expedition, the three men finally returned home as broken shadows of their former selves. Their sacrifice had exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government, but the price of that revelation was measured in destroyed lives and shattered families. The Blackwater mine had finally given up its secrets, revealing that the greatest treasures buried in American soil were not gold or silver, but the fundamental truths about government power that some forces would kill to keep hidden. Subscribe to our channel to explore more archived and disturbing cases. Thank you for following the story of Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter. We'll see you in the next video. The truth about what lies beneath our feet may be more terrifying than the darkness that conceals it. And sometimes the greatest courage is found not in descending into the depths, but in bringing what we find there into the light of day. 3 years have passed since Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter were finally brought home from the depths of the Blackwater mine, and the scars of their ordeal continue to define the lives of everyone touched by their story. The concrete barriers that once sealed the mine entrance have been replaced by a federal monument bearing their names, but the inscription, offers little comfort to families still grappling with the aftermath of government betrayal. Sarah Thompson has never left her husband's side since his return. The man who once filled their kitchen with excited talk of geological surveys and golden futures now sits silently by their window, staring at mountains that hold memories he can no longer access. Neurologists have confirmed that the experimental procedures conducted during his 7-year captivity created irreversible changes to his brain structure, effectively erasing the person he used to be while leaving his body intact. "I talk to him every day," Sarah tells visitors to their Denver home. "Sometimes I think I see recognition in his eyes, but the doctors say that's just wishful thinking. The Marcus I married died in that mine, even though his heart kept beating." David Rodriguez's condition proves slightly more responsive to treatment, though his recovery remains limited and heartbreaking. He can speak in short phrases and recognizes his sister Maria, but his memory exists in fragmented pieces that don't connect into coherent narrative. Maria has documented every small breakthrough in a journal she hopes might someday help other families facing similar tragedies. "Yesterday, he remembered the name of our dog from when we were kids," she wrote in a recent entry. "But he can't remember that our father died 2 years ago. It's like his mind is a puzzle with most of the pieces missing." James Carter's family faced the most difficult decision of all when doctors confirmed that he would never regain consciousness. The man who had brought 20 years of mining experience to the Blackwater expedition remained in a persistent vegetative state that required round-the-clock medical care. Catherine Carter spent 18 months advocating for experimental treatments before finally accepting that her husband existed somewhere between life and death, sustained by machines but unreachable by love. "The hardest part is that he's still here," she explains to support group meetings for families of government experimentation victims. "I can't grieve him properly because he's breathing, but I can't have him back because he's gone. It's a special kind of hell that the government created for us." The congressional investigations sparked by their case resulted in the creation of the Domestic Experimentation Accountability Office, a federal agency tasked with overseeing classified research programs and protecting civilian rights. However, critics argue that the office lacks enforcement power and remains subject to the same national security restrictions that enabled the original cover-up. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the office's chief scientific advisor, admits that meaningful reform faces institutional resistance. "We've made progress in documenting what happened, but preventing future incidents requires access to programs that remain classified at levels I'm not authorized to discuss," she testified during a recent oversight hearing. The $50 million settlement awarded to the families has funded extensive medical care for the survivors and established the Thompson-Rodriguez-Carter Foundation, which advocates for missing persons whose disappearances may be connected to government activities. The foundation has identified over 200 similar cases throughout the American West, suggesting that the Blackwater mine incident represents only a small fraction of ongoing classified operations. Foundation investigators continue to encounter federal resistance when attempting to access information about other underground facilities, indicating that the network of secret installations remains active and protected. Dorothy Manning, the retired county clerk whose conscience broke the case open, died of a heart attack in 2025 while living under federal protection in Oregon. Her final interview, conducted weeks before her death, revealed that she had been contacted by former government employees from across the country who described similar cover-up operations at classified facilities. "There are more Dorothy Mannings out there," she warned. "People who know the truth but are too scared to speak. My story isn't unique. It's just the one that finally got told." Nud. The underground facility beneath the Blackwater mine was permanently sealed in 2025, but satellite imagery suggests that related installations throughout the region remain operational. Ground-penetrating radar conducted by independent researchers has detected what appear to be expanded underground chambers at several locations, while electromagnetic anomalies recorded by civilian monitoring equipment indicate ongoing activity at depths consistent with the original facility. Federal authorities continue to restrict access to these areas under national security classifications that prevent meaningful investigation. Private investigator Janet Morrison has established a network of former government employees, whistleblowers, and affected families who continue documenting evidence of classified experimentation programs. Her research suggests that the consciousness manipulation technologies tested at Blackwater were part of a larger program involving multiple agencies and extending to facilities in other countries. "We've exposed one tentacle of something much larger," Morrison explains. "The question is whether we have the courage as a society to keep pulling until we see the whole creature." Sashi, the three mining families have become reluctant symbols of government accountability, speaking at congressional hearings and supporting legislation designed to protect civilians from classified programs. However, their advocacy work is complicated by ongoing federal restrictions that limit what they can publicly discuss about their case. Court-imposed gag orders protect classified details of the experimentation program, while national security reviews continue to restrict access to evidence that might reveal the full scope of government activities. Thomas Blackhorse's research into indigenous oral histories has gained new relevance as investigators discover that tribal warnings about underground dangers were based on centuries of accumulated knowledge about government activities in the region. "Our ancestors tried to warn people about disturbing the earth in these places," he explains, during educational presentations at universities. "They weren't talking about supernatural curses. They were describing a pattern of people disappearing when they went too deep into places that powerful forces wanted to keep secret." Medical research into the specific pharmaceutical agents used on the Blackwater miners has been classified under national security restrictions, preventing development of potential treatments for their conditions. Dr. Patricia Williams has joined with international human rights organizations to pressure the government for declassification of medical information that might help other victims, but legal challenges have been unsuccessful. "We can't even properly treat these men because the government won't tell us what was done to them," Williams testified during a recent human rights hearing. "It's a continuing violation of their rights and their families' rights." The Blackwater case has inspired similar investigations throughout the country, with families of missing persons organizing private searches of abandoned facilities and demanding government accountability. However, these efforts face significant legal and practical obstacles, including federal restraining orders, restricted access to public lands, and harassment of investigators by unknown parties. The pattern suggests that powerful forces remain committed to protecting the secrets buried beneath the American landscape. As this story concludes, the ultimate truth about the Blackwater mine and its connection to broader government activities remains partially hidden behind classifications that may never be lifted. The three miners who descended into those tunnels seeking gold discovered something far more valuable and dangerous: evidence of a shadow government operating beyond constitutional oversight and willing to destroy lives to protect its secrets. Their sacrifice has provided a glimpse into programs that most Americans never imagined existed, but the full scope of these activities continues to lurk in classified darkness. The families of Marcus Thompson, David Rodriguez, and James Carter continue their vigil, caring for men who returned from the depths as strangers wearing familiar faces. Their story serves as both warning and inspiration, a reminder that some truths come at a price too terrible to calculate, but too important to abandon. The Blackwater mine has been sealed, but the questions it raised about government power and civilian rights echo through courtrooms, congressional chambers, and the dreams of those who know that somewhere beneath our feet, in tunnels that shouldn't exist, other secrets wait to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them. In the end, the greatest treasure extracted from the Blackwater mine was not gold, but truth, fragmented, costly, and incomplete, but powerful enough to illuminate the darkness that surrounds the most closely guarded secrets of American power. The three men who paid the ultimate price for that truth remain with us as living reminders that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.